I'm Mackenzie, 29, a senior software engineer at a Boston tech firm. In my family, achievements are currency, and I've always been the odd one out despite my success. When my parents' 35th anniversary dinner invitation arrived, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this time would be different. After months of minimal contact, I was eager to reconnect and share my recent promotion. Little did I know, this elegant dinner would shatter our family dynamic forever. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a sprawling colonial home with perfectly manicured gardens that my mother Eleanor supervised with military precision. Our neighborhood was exclusive, the kind where people casually mention their vacation homes and private school tuitions over brunch. My father, Richard, built his wealth in investment banking before launching his own consulting firm. He worked 80-hour weeks throughout my childhood, and when he was home, conversations revolved around achievement, status, and keeping up appearances. My mother, Eleanor, was Miss Connecticut in her youth. She leveraged that brief fame into a strategic marriage and dedicated her life to maintaining our family's social standing. Her calendar was always filled with charity galas, tennis matches, and lunches with the right people. She had a particular talent for delivering cutting remarks with a sweet smile, especially to her children. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings and the only one who hasn't followed the prescribed family path. My oldest brother James is 36, a corporate lawyer specializing in mergers and acquisitions. He married Megan, a former debutante from a good family, as my mother would say, and they have 2 perfectly behaved children who attend the same private school we all did. James has the corner office, the vacation home in Martha's Vineyard, and my father's complete approval. Catherine, 34, is a pediatrician married to Daniel, a hospital administrator. They live in a restored Victorian home just 20 minutes from my parents. They have 1 child, a daughter who takes ballet, piano, and Mandarin lessons at age 6. Catherine hosts dinner parties where she serves homemade sourdough and discusses her medical humanitarian trips to developing countries. Then there's Michael, 32, who followed directly in our father's footsteps. He's an investment banker who recently married Ashley, a Princeton graduate from a wealthy Dallas family. Their wedding was featured in a regional luxury magazine, and my mother still finds ways to mention it in nearly every conversation. And then there's me. Mackenzie Campbell, unmarried, childless, and devoted to a career in technology that my parents struggled to understand or value. I graduated with honors from MIT with a computer science degree and now lead a development team at one of Boston's fastest-growing startups. Last year, I was named to a 30 under 30 list in the tech industry, but my mother's only comment was, "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Catherine is chairing the hospital fundraiser this year?" I've always been the family's black sheep, though on paper my achievements rival those of my siblings. The difference is that I chose a path my parents didn't outline for me. I live in a modern loft apartment instead of a suburban home with a white picket fence. I date occasionally but haven't settled down. I donate to causes my parents find controversial. I wear clothes for comfort rather than brand names. Family gatherings have always been exercises in subtle humiliation. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, my father gave detailed toasts to each of my siblings, highlighting their professional and personal milestones. When he got to me, he simply said, "And Mackenzie is still doing well with her computer work." I had just led the successful launch of a platform used by millions, but that didn't fit into his narrative of success. My relationship with my parents is complicated. I love them, of course I do. They provided me with every material advantage a child could want. I had the best education, traveled internationally from a young age, never wanted for anything tangible. What was missing was acceptance. Approval without conditions. Love that didn't feel like it came with a scorecard attached. There was a family dinner last Christmas where I tried to explain a breakthrough my team had made with an AI algorithm. My mother interrupted me to ask if I'd tried the new anti-aging serum she'd recommended. Later, when Michael described a fairly standard financial analysis he'd completed, my parents listened with rapt attention, asking insightful questions. Still, I kept trying. Each family gathering was another opportunity to finally earn their recognition. I maintained my relationship with them through weekly phone calls that left me emotionally drained and monthly visits that required days of mental preparation. The invitation to their 35th anniversary dinner had arrived in an embossed envelope with gold lettering. The event would be held at my parents' home, but catered by a renowned chef who had appeared on several cooking shows. The dress code was formal. I immediately marked my calendar and requested time off work. 2 weeks before the dinner, I received exciting news. I was being promoted to Director of Engineering with a substantial salary increase and equity package. After years of 70-hour work weeks and sacrificed weekends, my dedication had paid off. This was exactly the kind of achievement my family valued, or so I thought. I spent an entire weekend searching for the perfect dress, eventually selecting a tailored midnight blue gown that projected both sophistication and success. I had my hair professionally styled, splurged on new makeup, and purchased a pair of diamond earrings that cost nearly a month's rent, an extravagance I would typically avoid, but I wanted to look the part of a successful daughter. I also carefully selected my parents' anniversary gift, a custom-made crystal vase from a renowned artist whose work was displayed in museums, including one piece my mother had admired during a gallery opening years ago. I'd been saving for months to afford it. The night before the dinner, I rehearsed how I'd share my news. Not too boastful, but confident. I practiced answers to potential dismissive comments. I visualized my parents finally saying they were proud of me. This time would be different. This time I'd break through. I just needed to present my accomplishments in terms they understood and valued. Director was a title that conveyed authority. The salary bump put me in an income bracket my father respected. The company's prestige would satisfy my mother's status concerns. I had all the right elements to finally earn my place at the family table, literally and figuratively. As I laid out my outfit and packed the carefully wrapped anniversary gift, I felt genuinely hopeful. Maybe this milestone would finally bridge the gap between us. Maybe at 29, I would finally feel like a valued member of the Campbell family. The day of the anniversary dinner arrived with perfect early summer weather, sunny and warm with a gentle breeze. As I applied my makeup, I gave myself a pep talk in the mirror. You're accomplished, intelligent, and worthy of respect. Tonight will be different. I repeated these affirmations while slipping into my midnight blue dress and fastening those expensive diamond earrings. I checked my appearance one final time before heading out. The woman in the mirror looked polished and successful, exactly the daughter my parents should be proud to have. I carefully placed their gift in my car and began the 90-minute drive from Boston to Greenwich. During the drive, I rehearsed mentioning my promotion. By the way, I have some exciting news to share. I've been promoted to Director of Engineering. Simple, straightforward, not too boastful. I practiced receiving congratulations graciously. I imagined my father finally giving me that approving nod he reserved for my siblings. When I turned onto the long driveway leading to my parents' colonial mansion, my stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. The house looked particularly impressive today, with professional landscaping freshly completed and white roses in full bloom along the walkway. Several luxury vehicles already lined the circular driveway. My siblings had arrived before me. I checked my watch, 6:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the stated arrival time. I'd planned to be early to help with any last-minute preparations, a strategy I'd employed since childhood to demonstrate my usefulness. I took a deep breath, grabbed the gift, and approached the front door. My mother answered wearing an elegant silver gown and pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. "Mackenzie, there you are." She air-kissed both my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. You look appropriate. Come in, everyone's already here. The entry hall was filled with elaborate flower arrangements, and the sound of classical music drifted from hidden speakers. My father emerged from his study, distinguished in his tailored tuxedo. "Mackenzie," he said with a nod, then checked his watch. "Right on time." "Good." The simple greeting was as warm as I could expect from Richard Campbell. I handed him the anniversary gift, which he passed immediately to my mother without opening it. "Let's put this with the others, shall we?" she said, placing it on an already crowded table in the corner. My siblings and their spouses mingled in the living room, champagne flutes in hand. James and Megan stood near the fireplace, both looking like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine advertisement. Catherine and Daniel were engaged in conversation with a couple I didn't recognize, likely my parents' friends. Michael was showing his new wife Ashley the family photos on the mantel, carefully explaining who was who. "Mackenzie." Catherine spotted me first, waving me over. "We were just wondering when you'd arrive." I navigated through the room, accepting a glass of champagne from a server. "I'm actually 15 minutes early," I pointed out with a smile. "Oh, are you?" "We all decided to come an hour early to help set up," Catherine replied. The implication was clear. I should have known to arrive earlier than the stated time. Another unspoken family rule I'd failed to follow. "The dress is nice," Megan commented, giving me a quick once-over. "Is it off the rack?" The question carried the subtle hint that anything not custom-made or designer was somehow lesser. "Thanks," I replied, choosing not to engage with the implied criticism. "Congratulations on your firm's recent case, James. I read about it in the journal." James straightened his already perfect posture. "Yes, quite a significant win. Dad's connections with the judge certainly didn't hurt." He laughed, and the others joined in knowingly. I tried to find an opening to mention my promotion as conversations swirled around me. Michael was describing his recent business trip to Tokyo, commanding everyone's attention with tales of exclusive restaurants and meetings with financial executives. "Actually, I have some news," I began during a brief lull. "Oh, before I forget," my mother interrupted, "Ashley and Michael are considering the house on Willow Street. You know, the Georgian colonial next to the Petersons." She turned to Ashley. "I've already spoken to the realtor. She'll give you a private showing before it officially hits the market." I took another sip of champagne and tried again a few minutes later. "I wanted to share something." "Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes, my father announced, cutting me off unintentionally. "Eleanor, why don't you show everyone the new art installation in the garden?" My mother brightened. "Yes, we commissioned it specially for the anniversary. Everyone outside, please." As the group moved toward the terrace doors, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Michael, hanging back slightly. "You okay, Mac? You seem a bit quiet." It was the first genuine interaction I'd had since arriving. "I'm fine. Just trying to share some news about work, but the moment hasn't been right." "What's up?" he asked, seeming genuinely interested. "I got promoted to director of engineering," I told him, relieved to finally say the words aloud. "Hey, that's fantastic." His smile seemed genuine. "That's a big deal, right? You should definitely mention it during dinner." "Thanks, I'll try," I said, grateful for the small encouragement. Michael and I joined the others in the garden, where my parents were proudly showing off an abstract sculpture that probably cost more than my annual salary. My mother was explaining how the artist was very exclusive and had a waiting list of 3 years. During the garden tour, I overheard my mother speaking to one of her friends. "James is handling the Johnson merger, biggest deal of the year. And Catherine's research is being published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Michael just closed a $20 million investment deal." A pause. "All our children are doing so well." I wasn't mentioned at all. Despite being just a few feet away, I might as well have been invisible. As we moved back inside for pre-dinner drinks, I noticed the formal dining room through open pocket doors. The table was set immaculately with my mother's best china, crystal, and silver. Place cards in calligraphy marked each setting. I counted the chairs, exactly enough for my parents, my 3 siblings and their spouses, plus 2 other couples who appeared to be close friends of my parents. In the adjacent breakfast nook, I glimpsed another table, smaller, with colorful plastic placemats and paper napkins. My nieces and nephews would sit there, I assumed. Standard practice for family gatherings. Mackenzie, my mother called from across the room. Be a dear and make sure the children have everything they need when they come down. Ashley's parents will be watching them after dinner, but they'll join us for the meal. I nodded automatically, years of compliance difficult to break. It wasn't until later that I realized this was the beginning of what was to come. As dinner approached, I made one more attempt to share my news. I approached my father as he selected a bottle of wine from his collection. Dad, I wanted to let you know that I received a significant promotion at work. I am now director of engineering. He paused, bottle in hand. Director? At your age? That's unusual. For a moment, I thought I'd broken through. Then he continued, though I suppose titles in tech companies don't carry the same weight as in established industries. Still, it's good you're advancing. He returned his attention to the wine. This Bordeaux is from 1982, a remarkable year. And just like that, my achievement was acknowledged and dismissed in the same breath. The dinner bell chimed, signaling it was time to move to the dining room. As everyone began to take their seats, I searched for my name among the elegant place cards. I circled the dining table twice, carefully checking each place card. Catherine, James, Michael, their spouses, my parents, and the 2 other couples all had assigned seats at the large mahogany table gleaming under the crystal chandelier. My name was conspicuously absent. Mother, I said quietly, approaching Eleanor as she adjusted a flower arrangement. I don't see my place card. She barely glanced up. Oh, Mackenzie, you'll be sitting at the other table. She gestured vaguely toward the breakfast nook. With the children. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. The children's table? But I'm 29. Yes, but we need all the married couples at the main table, she explained as if it were perfectly logical. We'll be discussing some important family business matters during dinner. Investment opportunities, the family trust, vacation property planning, adult things. She patted my arm. You understand. I didn't understand. Not at all. But I am an adult, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'm a director at my company. I manage a team of 15 people and a multi-million-dollar budget. My mother sighed with practiced patience. Mackenzie, don't make this difficult. The seating is already arranged. The children will enjoy having you there. You can help cut their food and make sure they don't spill anything. Before I could respond, she turned to greet one of their friends, effectively ending our conversation. I stood frozen, processing what had just happened. My mother had explicitly stated that in her eyes, I wasn't an adult. Despite my age, education, career, and independent life, I didn't qualify for the adult table because I wasn't married. I glanced around, wondering if anyone else found this as absurd as I did. My siblings were all taking their seats, engrossed in conversation. Had they known about this arrangement? Did they think it was acceptable? In a daze, I walked over to the kids' table. It was covered with a plastic tablecloth featuring cartoon characters. Paper plates and plastic cups were set at each place, along with colorful napkins. A stark contrast to the fine china, crystal glassware, and linen napkins at the main table. My nieces and nephews began filtering in, ranging from 4 to 9 years old. James's son Henry, the oldest at 9, looked surprised to see me. Aunt Mackenzie, are you sitting with us? I forced a smile. Apparently so. But you're a grown-up, he said with the straightforward logic of a child. You'd think so, wouldn't you? I replied, trying to keep my tone light. 8-year-old Sophie, Catherine's daughter, climbed into the chair beside me. I'm glad you're sitting with us. The grown-up table is boring anyway. They just talk about money and stuff. I helped the younger children into booster seats while the catering staff began serving appetizers. At the main table, delicate plates of seared scallops with truffle oil were being presented. At our table, a server somewhat apologetically set down a platter of chicken fingers and carrot sticks. "Miss, would you like the adult appetizer?" the server asked me quietly. Before I could answer, my mother called from the main table. "Just give her the children's meal. It's simpler that way." The server gave me a sympathetic look before walking away. I sat there, surrounded by children, watching as my family engaged in animated conversation at the adult table. Occasionally, one of them would glance over Catherine with apparent sympathy, James with disinterest, Michael with what seemed like discomfort. "Aunt Mackenzie, can you open my ketchup?" asked James's younger son Ethan, handing me a small packet. I tore it open for him, then helped Sophie cut her chicken into smaller pieces. All the while, I maintained a calm exterior while internally cycling through shock, humiliation, anger, and hurt. From the main table, I could hear fragments of conversation. They were indeed discussing family financial matters, the shared vacation property in the Berkshires, investment opportunities, tax strategies. Things that, as a financially independent adult with my own investments, I had every right to participate in. At one point, I tried to join their conversation from my seat. My father was discussing a potential investment opportunity. "Have you considered tech startups?" I called over. "The sector I work in has several promising companies with strong growth potential." The table fell silent, everyone turning to look at me. My father cleared his throat. "We're focusing on established industries with proven track records." He turned back to the others, effectively dismissing my input. The conversation at the main table resumed, and I returned my attention to the children, who at least seemed to value my presence. 6-year-old Charlotte tugged on my sleeve. "Can you tell us a story, Aunt Mackenzie?" I smiled at her. "What kind of story would you like?" "One about a princess who's also a scientist," she said decisively. For the next few minutes, I improvised a tale about a brilliant princess who invented a machine that could talk to animals, much to the children's delight. It was the most appreciation I'd received all evening. When the main course arrived, the difference in meals became even more pronounced. The adults were served perfectly cooked filet mignon with roasted vegetables and truffle mashed potatoes, accompanied by expensive red wine. Our table received pasta with plain marinara sauce and apple juice in plastic cups. I caught Michael looking over at me several times, a crease between his eyebrows. Once, he seemed about to say something but was pulled back into conversation by Ashley. Dessert was the final insult. The adult table was served a delicate chocolate soufflé with gold leaf and aged port. The children's table got ice cream sundaes with sprinkles. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the ice cream, but each spoonful tasted like humiliation. Throughout the meal, I maintained my composure. I engaged with the children, helped them when needed, and pretended this situation was perfectly normal. But inside, something had shifted. A lifetime of seeking approval, of making excuses for my family's behavior, of believing that if I just achieved enough they would finally see me as an equal, it all crystallized into a moment of clarity. I would never be enough for them. Not because of any deficiency on my part, but because they had decided my worth was tied to fitting their narrow definition of success: marriage, conventional career, traditional life choices. My accomplishments would always be secondary because they didn't align with their preferred narrative. As I sat there, helping Charlotte wipe ice cream from her chin, I made a decision. I wouldn't cause a scene. I wouldn't confront them publicly. But I also wouldn't continue to participate in my own diminishment. As the evening progressed, my parents moved to the formal living room for coffee and after-dinner drinks. The nanny arrived to take the children upstairs for bed, yet no one indicated I should join the adults. It was as if I existed in some nebulous space between childhood and adulthood in my family's eyes, old enough to supervise children, but not mature enough to participate in grown-up conversations. "Aunt Mackenzie?" Charlotte tugged at my dress before being led upstairs. Will you come read me a bedtime story later? I knelt down to her level. Not tonight, sweetheart. I have to leave soon, but I'll see you another time, okay? I gave her a tight hug, inhaling the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. Promise. Her small voice held such sincerity. I promise, I replied, meaning it despite my uncertainty about when I'd next interact with my family. As the children were led upstairs, I slipped into the powder room to collect myself. The face in the mirror looked composed, but I recognized the hurt in my own eyes. I'd spent years believing that if I just achieved enough, proved myself enough, my family would finally see me as their equal. Tonight had shattered that illusion conclusively. I refreshed my lipstick and took several deep breaths. Then I made a decision I would leave quietly, without confrontation or drama. Not out of cowardice, but because creating a scene would only reinforce their view of me as immature and emotional. I returned to find my family and their friends engaged in animated conversation in the living room. Crystal glasses of expensive cognac in hand, they were laughing at something James had said. No one noticed as I entered the room or as I collected my small evening purse from where I'd left it. My father had just stood to make a toast. To 35 remarkable years with the most extraordinary woman, he began, raising his glass to my mother. All attention was on him, which provided the perfect cover for my exit. I slipped out of the living room and through the grand foyer. I didn't stop to retrieve my wrap from the coat closet. The summer night was warm enough. At the last moment, I hesitated by the gift table, considering whether to take back the expensive crystal vase I'd given them. But no, that would be petty. Let them have it, even if they'd probably never appreciate the thought behind it. The heavy front door closed behind me with a soft click, and suddenly I was alone in the quiet night. The contrast between the brightly lit house full of people and the solitary darkness outside was jarring but somehow appropriate. I'd always been on the outside looking in with my family, even when physically present. I walked to my car, grateful I'd parked it myself rather than using the valet service. The drive home was a blur of headlights and empty highways. My mind cycled through memories of countless family gatherings where I'd been diminished, dismissed, or outright ignored. The kids' table tonight wasn't an anomaly, it was just the most literal manifestation of how they'd always treated me. When I finally reached my apartment in Boston, it was just past midnight. I kicked off my heels in the entryway and unzipped the expensive dress that had done nothing to earn me a place at the adult table. In my bathroom, I carefully removed the diamond earrings and placed them in their box. They represented something I no longer wanted, the desperate need for external validation from people incapable of giving it. My phone, which I'd silenced during the drive, began buzzing with notifications as soon as I turned on the ringer. 2 missed calls from Michael, 1 from Catherine. Nothing from my parents or James. I turned the phone off completely and placed it on my nightstand. That night, I cried. Not delicate, dignified tears, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that released years of accumulated hurt. I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to make her parents proud. For the teenager who had excelled academically but was still somehow lacking. For the adult who had achieved remarkable professional success but wasn't considered mature enough to sit at a dinner table with other adults. When the tears finally subsided, I felt something unexpected, calm. A strange, peaceful clarity descended over me. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by my window, looking out at the Boston skyline. The city lights twinkled back at me, steady and unchanged by my personal crisis. There was something comforting in that constancy. In that quiet moment, I drew a mental boundary. I wouldn't cut off my family entirely. They were still my family, after all. But I would no longer measure my worth by their limited yardstick. I would no longer twist myself into shapes trying to earn their approval. I would engage with them on my terms, protecting my own emotional well-being first. Before going to bed, I checked my phone one last time. The missed calls had multiplied, 5 from my mother, 3 more from Michael, 2 from Catherine, 1 from James, and even 1 from my father, unprecedented in my memory. Text messages had accumulated as well, ranging from Michael's concerned, "Are you okay? Where did you go?" to my mother's increasingly irritated, "Where are you?" to "How could you be so rude as to leave without saying goodbye?" I turned the phone off again and placed it in a drawer. Whatever crisis they were experiencing due to my absence, it could wait until I was ready to engage. For perhaps the first time in my life, I prioritized my own emotional needs over their expectations. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt something shifting inside me, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. The hurt was still there, but alongside it grew something new: self-respect. The kind that comes not from external validation, but from honoring your own boundaries. My last thought before sleep claimed me was that sometimes the most powerful response isn't a dramatic confrontation, but simply removing yourself from a situation that diminishes you. In walking away without drama, I had finally claimed my adulthood more definitively than any seat at their table could have confirmed. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. For a moment, I existed in the peaceful space between sleep and full consciousness, before the events of the previous night came flooding back. My first instinct was to check my phone, to see the damage, to begin the familiar cycle of explanation and appeasement. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on my small balcony, watching the city come alive below me. Only after finishing my coffee did I retrieve my phone from the drawer. 26 missed calls, 43 text messages, 9 voicemails. The missed calls were primarily from my mother, 12, with others distributed among my father, 3, more than he'd called in the previous year combined, Catherine, 5, James, 2, and Michael, 4. Even Ashley and Megan had each called once. I scrolled through the text messages without opening them. The previews told me enough. They ranged from concerned to confused to angry. My mother's messages had a clear progression from "Where did you go?" to "Call me immediately" to "This behavior is completely unacceptable." I didn't listen to the voicemails. Instead, I sent a brief text to Michael, who had seemed the most genuinely concerned. "I'm fine. Need some time. We'll be in touch when I'm ready." Then I turned my phone off again. That morning, I called my office and requested a week of personal leave. As a newly promoted director who rarely took time off, my request was granted without question. I needed space to process what had happened and what it meant for my relationship with my family going forward. The first 2 days were the hardest. Years of conditioning had trained me to respond immediately to family demands, to smooth things over, to be the peacekeeper. The silence felt both liberating and terrifying. What would happen if I simply refused to play my assigned role? On the 3rd day of my self-imposed exile, I called my therapist, Dr. Larson, whom I'd been seeing on and off for years. She squeezed me in for an emergency session that afternoon. "They sat you at the children's table?" Dr. Larson repeated, her professional composure momentarily slipping to reveal genuine surprise. I nodded, recounting the details of the evening and my silent departure. "How did that make you feel?" she asked, the classic therapist question, somehow exactly what I needed. "Invisible," I replied after a moment's consideration. "Like no matter what I achieve professionally or personally, I'll never be a real adult in their eyes because I'm not married." Dr. Larson nodded. "You've talked before about feeling that your accomplishments aren't valued in your family. This seems like a particularly concrete manifestation of that dynamic. It's like they have this script for what success looks like," I said, "and no matter how successful I am by normal standards, if I don't follow their script exactly, it doesn't count." "What does your script look like, Mackenzie?" she asked. "Not theirs, yours." The question caught me off guard. I'd spent so much time trying to earn approval within their value system that I hadn't fully articulated my own. We spent the rest of the session exploring that question, and I left with homework to write my own definition of a successful, meaningful life. That evening, I called Sophie, my closest friend since college. She had been warning me about my family's treatment for years, but I'd always defended them or minimized their behavior. They did what? Sophie exclaimed when I told her about the kids' table. Mac, I don't even have words. I know it sounds ridiculous, I said. If it had happened to someone else, I'd tell them to cut those toxic people out of their life immediately. So why are you holding yourself to a different standard? She asked gently. Because they're family, I answered automatically, then paused. But that's not a good enough reason to accept being treated like I'm less than, is it? No, it's not, Sophie confirmed. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to diminish you. Over the next few days, I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while pursuing my career and my family's approval. I was surprised by how many of them expressed concern about how my family treated me, concerns I dismissed in the past. Remember when your parents visited last year? My friend Tara reminded me over coffee. Your mom kept introducing you as our daughter who works with computers even after you explained you were leading major software development projects. And when we all went to dinner, added our friend Derek, your dad spent 20 minutes talking about your brother's job, but changed the subject when you tried to explain your recent promotion. I'd rationalized these incidents at the time. My parents didn't understand tech. They were just proud of James. They didn't mean anything by it. Now I saw them as part of a pattern I could no longer ignore. I spent the remainder of my week off engaged in what I could only describe as emotional archaeology, excavating years of interactions with my family and examining them with fresh eyes. I started journaling, filling pages with memories and patterns I'd previously excused or normalized. I remembered being 16 and winning a national coding competition, only to have my father ask why I couldn't apply that intelligence to something practical like pre-med courses. I remembered my mother's thinly veiled disappointment when I chose MIT over her alma mater. I remembered countless holiday dinners where my sibling spouses were included in family photos while I was told to take one of everyone together. The journaling exercise was painful but clarifying. I wasn't imagining the pattern, it was real and consistent. My family's inability to value me as I was had nothing to do with my worth and everything to do with their narrow definition of success. During this week, I also rediscovered interests I'd abandoned while pursuing career advancement and family approval. I dug out my watercolors, untouched for years, and spent an afternoon painting by the Charles River. I attended a pottery class I'd been meaning to try. I went to a concert alone and enjoyed every minute. I reorganized my apartment, donating clothes I'd bought to impress my mother, but never felt comfortable wearing. I rearranged my furniture to better suit my preferences rather than adhering to my mother's decorating advice. These small changes were symbolic of the larger shift happening inside me, creating space for my authentic self rather than the person my family wanted me to be. On the 6th day of my silence, I started drafting a letter to my family. I didn't intend to send it immediately, but the process of articulating my feelings helped clarify my thoughts. I wrote about the consistent pattern of dismissal I'd experienced, about how the kids' table incident was merely the most obvious manifestation of how they'd always treated me, about my need for respect and recognition of my adulthood and accomplishments. I don't need you to understand my career choices or life decisions, I wrote. I need you to respect that they are mine to make. I don't need you to value what I value, but I need you to respect that my values are valid. I don't need you to approve of my path, but I need you to acknowledge that it is a legitimate path. I didn't send the letter. Not yet. But writing it helped me understand what I needed from my family going forward and what boundaries I needed to establish. By the end of the week, I felt stronger and clearer than I had in years. The hurt hadn't disappeared. I doubted it ever would completely. But it no longer dominated my emotional landscape. Instead, I felt a growing sense of self-trust and determination. On Sunday night, before returning to work, I turned my phone back on, prepared to face whatever awaited me. The deluge of notifications was overwhelming. More missed calls, more texts, even emails. My mother had progressed from anger to concern to outright manipulation, her last message reading, "Your father's blood pressure is elevated because of your behavior. Is that what you want?" I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the boundaries I'd established during my week of reflection. Then I sent a brief message to the family group chat. I'm safe and well. I needed time to process what happened at the dinner. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to discuss it. Please respect my need for space right now. Then I muted the chat, set my phone aside, and prepared for my first day as a director who no longer needed her family's validation to know her worth. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, I finally felt ready to face the accumulated messages from my family. On a Saturday morning, armed with coffee and the emotional fortitude I'd built during my period of silence, I sat down to read through everything. My mother's messages followed a predictable pattern: initial irritation at my rudeness for leaving without saying goodbye, escalating to outright anger. This is completely unacceptable behavior. Then pivoting to guilt tactics. We're sick with worry. And finally settling into icy disappointment. I raised you better than this. My father's texts were brief and businesslike. Call your mother. This behavior is inappropriate. We expect an explanation. The formal tone couldn't mask the underlying command. Fall back in line. James's messages were sparse and formal. Your departure was noticed. Mother is upset. You should call. No question about whether I was okay. No acknowledgement of why I might have left. Catherine's texts showed more concern. Mac, are you all right? Let me know you're safe. Then later, I understand you might have felt uncomfortable, but disappearing isn't the solution. Mom and Dad are really worried. Her messages balanced genuine concern with subtle pressure to conform to family expectations, typical Catherine. Michael's messages surprised me the most. I get why you left. That kids' table thing was messed up. Let me know if you want to talk. And later, they're going ballistic about you not responding. Take the time you need, but I'm here when you're ready. I hadn't expected such understanding from any of them. Michael and I had always gotten along well enough, but we'd never been particularly close. His recognition of the situation gave me a glimmer of hope that at least one family member might be capable of seeing my perspective. After reading everything, I responded individually to my siblings. To James, a brief, I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. To Catherine, a little more. I appreciate your worry, but I needed space to process how I was treated. To Michael, I sent, thanks for understanding. I might take you up on that talk soon. I didn't respond to my parents yet. I needed more time to formulate a response that was neither placating nor inflammatory, a difficult balance with them. 3 days later, as I was leaving my office building, I spotted my parents' Mercedes parked across the street. My stomach dropped. The surprise ambush was a classic Eleanor Campbell tactic, one she'd employed since my childhood whenever she felt I was avoiding necessary discipline. They exited the car when they saw me, both dressed impeccably as always. My mother in a tailored Burberry coat despite the warm weather, my father in one of his custom suits. They looked so out of place among the casually dressed tech workers streaming out of my building. Mackenzie, my mother called, striding toward me with purpose. Finally. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I sent a message saying I needed space. Space? My father's tone made the word sound ridiculous. You can't just disappear after behaving rudely at an important family event. Several of my colleagues passed by, glancing curiously at the unfolding scene. I had no desire to have this conversation on the sidewalk outside my workplace. There's a coffee shop around the corner, I said, keeping my voice level. We can talk there. The cafe was busy enough to provide background noise, but not so crowded that we couldn't find a table in the corner. My parents looked distinctly uncomfortable in the hipster establishment with its mismatched furniture and baristas sporting colorful hair and tattoos. What is this place? My mother asked, eyeing a nearby table where a young man with a septum piercing typed on a laptop decorated with stickers. A coffee shop where normal people go, I replied, unable to completely suppress my irritation. What are you doing in Boston? You could have called before coming. We did call. Many times. My father's voice carried that familiar note of authority that had intimidated me throughout my childhood. You chose not to answer. I sent a message explaining that I needed time. Enough about needing time, my mother interrupted. We've come for an explanation. Leaving in the middle of our anniversary dinner without a word? Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Mrs. Rothschild asked where you'd gone, and I had no answer. Of course, her primary concern was how my absence had affected her social standing. I left because I was hurt and humiliated, I said directly. You sat me at the children's table, Mother. I'm 29 years old. Don't be so dramatic. It was a practical arrangement. The main table was for couples discussing family business matters. I am family. I have as much right to be involved in family business discussions as anyone else. My father cleared his throat. The discussions primarily concerned matters relevant to established households, estate planning, property investments. I own property, I interrupted. I have investments. I manage a multi-million-dollar budget at work. I was just promoted to director of engineering, not that either of you bothered to ask about my career. There's no need to take that tone, my mother said, looking around as if concerned someone might overhear. We've always supported your computer hobby. It's not a hobby, Mother. It's my career. A successful one. Of course it is, dear, she said dismissively. But family gatherings are about family matters. And I'm not family? The question hung in the air between us. My father looked genuinely confused. Don't be absurd, Mackenzie. Of course you're family. Then why am I consistently treated as less than? Why are my accomplishments dismissed? Why was I seated with children instead of with the other adults in the family? You're being oversensitive, my mother said, reaching for her water glass. As usual. No, I'm not. This has been a pattern my entire life. The kids' table was just the most literal manifestation of how you view me as not quite an adult because I haven't followed your precise definition of success. My parents exchanged a look I knew well. The Mackenzie is being difficult again, look I'd seen throughout my childhood and adolescence. We've always wanted what's best for you, my father said stiffly. No, you've wanted what you think is best for me. What fits your narrative of success? You've never asked what I want or valued what I've achieved on my own terms. My mother's expression hardened. We gave you every advantage. The best schools, every opportunity. If you've chosen a path that's less conventional, that's your prerogative. But don't blame us for the natural consequences. Natural consequences? Being seated with children at a family dinner is not a natural consequence of my career choice or marital status. It's a deliberate exclusion. You're blowing this entirely out of proportion, my father said. It was a seating arrangement, not a judgment. It was both, I insisted. And it's part of a lifelong pattern. When have either of you ever shown genuine interest in my work? When have you ever acknowledged my accomplishments without immediately comparing them to James or Catherine or Michael? They were silent, perhaps genuinely trying to recall such an instance and coming up empty. We don't understand your work, my mother finally said, as if that excused everything. You've never tried to understand it. Or me. More uncomfortable silence followed. My father checked his watch, a gesture I'd seen countless times during conversations he found tedious or challenging. What exactly do you want from us, Mackenzie? He asked. Respect, I answered without hesitation. Recognition that I'm an adult with valid choices and achievements, even if they're different from what you would have chosen. Acknowledgement that my place in this family is equal to my siblings, regardless of whether I'm married or have children. My mother sighed dramatically. If we've given you the impression that we don't respect you, then I suppose we apologize. But disappearing from the dinner and ignoring our calls was childish. That's hardly the behavior of someone asking to be treated as an adult. Her non-apology and immediate criticism were so predictable I almost laughed. I left quietly to avoid causing a scene. I took time away to process my feelings instead of responding emotionally. Those were mature choices. The mature choice would have been to stay and discuss any concerns appropriately, my father countered. When? Between cutting the children's food and being explicitly told that the adult conversations weren't for me. We went back and forth like this for nearly an hour, talking in circles. They acknowledged no wrongdoing beyond, perhaps, a misunderstanding. I refused to accept that characterization of what had happened. Finally, my mother delivered her ultimatum. This has gone on long enough. We expect you to apologize for leaving the dinner and causing us worry. Then we can put this unfortunate episode behind us and return to normal. Normal isn't working for me anymore, I replied quietly. I won't apologize for protecting myself from further hurt. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be one based on mutual respect. My father's expression darkened. That sounds like a condition. It's a boundary, I corrected. I love you both, but I won't continue to participate in dynamics that diminish me. My mother's face went through a series of expressions. Shock, confusion, anger, and finally a cold detachment I'd seen directed at others, but never at me. I don't even recognize you anymore, she said, gathering her purse. This isn't how we raised you to behave. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, I replied. They left shortly after, my father leaving cash on the table for coffees that had gone cold and largely untouched. No hugs, no resolution, just my mother's parting comment. Call us when you're ready to be reasonable. I sat alone in the cafe long after they'd gone, processing the conversation. It had gone exactly as I'd expected and feared. They were incapable of seeing my perspective or acknowledging their behavior. Yet despite the pain, I felt strangely peaceful. I had stood my ground, articulated my feelings, and set clear boundaries, all things the old Mackenzie would have found terrifying. As I finally left the cafe, I realized I was walking a little taller, breathing a little easier. The confrontation hadn't yielded the understanding I might have hoped for, but it had confirmed what I needed to do for my own well-being. Sometimes the most valuable outcome of speaking your truth isn't changing others' minds, it's confirming your own. 6 months passed after the confrontation with my parents. Autumn leaves had given way to Boston's first winter snow, and my life had settled into a new rhythm, one defined by my choices rather than my family's expectations. My relationship with my parents remained distant but civil. We exchanged brief texts on holidays and birthdays. They sent an expensive but impersonal gift for Christmas. I called them once a month for short, surface-level conversations. It wasn't the warm, accepting relationship I'd once hoped for, but it was one I could navigate without sacrificing my self-respect. James and I had little contact beyond family logistics. Catherine made occasional efforts, inviting me to lunch when she was in Boston for medical conferences. These meetings were awkward, but not unpleasant. She clearly didn't fully understand my perspective, but was trying in her limited way. My relationship with Michael, surprisingly, had deepened. After the confrontation with our parents, he'd called me. "They're telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown," he'd said without preamble. I had laughed despite myself. Of course they are. For what it's worth, I told them they were wrong. That kids' table thing was messed up. I should have said something that night. That conversation had been the beginning of a new understanding between us. Michael, it turned out, had his own complicated feelings about our family dynamics. As the golden boy who had followed our father's exact career path, he'd experienced a different kind of pressure, the expectation of perfection, the conditional love tied to achievement. We began meeting for dinner every few weeks when his work brought him to Boston. During one of these dinners, he confessed, "Sometimes I envy you for breaking away. I've built my entire life around their definition of success, and some days I wake up wondering if any of it is actually what I want." These conversations gave me an unexpected gift, a genuine relationship with at least one family member, built on honesty rather than performance. Professionally, I continued to thrive. The promotion to director had brought new challenges and opportunities. Without the emotional drain of constantly seeking my family's approval, I had more energy to invest in my work and my team. I received an industry leadership award that the old Mackenzie would have immediately called her parents about, seeking validation they'd never truly give. The new Mackenzie celebrated with friends who genuinely understood the achievement. Speaking of friends, my social circle had expanded and deepened. I joined a support group for adults dealing with family expectations, which met weekly in a community center downtown. Hearing others' stories, some painfully similar to mine, helped me understand that my experience wasn't unique and gave me tools for continuing to navigate my relationship with my parents. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Gloria, our group facilitator, often reminded us. You can love your family while still protecting yourself from harmful patterns. I'd also started dating again, but with a different approach. Before, I'd either hidden potential partners from my family, knowing they wouldn't approve, or I'd evaluated them partly through my parents' likely perception. Now I was seeing someone, Brian, a high school music teacher with a warm laugh and thoughtful nature, who the old Mackenzie might have hesitated to introduce to my status-conscious family. The new Mackenzie simply enjoyed his company and the way he listened attentively when I talked about my work, even though he didn't understand all the technical details. As Thanksgiving approached, the inevitable family invitation arrived, a formal email from my mother detailing the schedule, dress code, and sleeping arrangements. I declined politely, explaining I had made other plans. The other plans were real. I'd organized a Friendsgiving at my apartment for others who, for various reasons, weren't spending the holiday with biological family. Sophie was coming, along with several colleagues who lived too far from home to travel for the short holiday, 2 members from my support group, and Brian. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke early to start preparing. My apartment filled with the sense of roasting turkey and baking pies. Sophie arrived first, arms full of wine bottles and side dishes. Your mom called me yesterday, she announced as she arranged cheese on a platter. She wanted to know if I knew why you weren't coming home for Thanksgiving. I paused in my vegetable chopping. What did you tell her? That she should ask you directly, Sophie replied. Then I said you were hosting your own Thanksgiving for friends and that I was looking forward to it. She didn't like that much. I laughed, but there was a twinge of sadness too. Even after everything, a small part of me still wished for their understanding, their acceptance. Not enough to sacrifice my well-being, but enough to feel the loss of what might have been. Do you regret it? Sophie asked, reading my expression. Setting boundaries with them? I considered the question seriously. No. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they couldn't give me what I needed. But I don't regret choosing myself. My apartment gradually filled with guests, laughter, and conversation. We ate at mismatched tables pushed together in my living room, using my everyday plates alongside borrowed dishes and disposable options. Some of us dressed up, others came in jeans and sweaters. Nobody cared. During dinner, we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. When my turn came, I looked at the diverse faces surrounding me, people who accepted me exactly as I was. I'm grateful for chosen family, I said. For the people who see you clearly and love you anyway. For second chances and new beginnings. For the courage to define success on my own terms. Later that evening, after most guests had left and only Sophie and Brian remained to help with cleanup, my phone rang. It was Michael. Happy Thanksgiving, he said when I answered. Just calling to check in. Things are tense here without you. I'm sorry about that, I said, meaning it. How are you doing? Managing. Ashley and I have been talking. About a lot of things, actually. About family patterns we don't want to continue. He paused. Your standing up to mom and dad made me think about stuff I've been accepting that I shouldn't. We chatted for a few more minutes before he had to rejoin the family dinner. After hanging up, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, sadness for the ongoing family tension, hope for Michael's growing awareness, pride in my own journey. The healing process wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes I still caught myself seeking approval or measuring my worth by my family's standards. But those moments became less frequent, less powerful. I was learning that family relationships exist on a spectrum. Complete estrangement wasn't necessary, but neither was complete submission to harmful dynamics. I could maintain limited contact on my terms while building a fulfilling life centered on my own values. Perhaps the most important lesson was recognizing that the absence of my parents' approval didn't diminish my accomplishments or worth. Their inability to see and celebrate me spoke to their limitations, not mine. And while I might always carry some sadness about what our relationship could have been, I didn't have to let that define my future. As winter settled over Boston, I looked forward to the year ahead with a sense of peace I'd never known before. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. But because I had finally learned to define my own worth rather than outsourcing that judgment to others, even those who had known me longest. The journey wasn't over. Family dynamics don't transform overnight, and old patterns have a way of resurfacing when least expected. But I had tools now that I hadn't possessed before: boundaries, self-awareness, a support system, and most importantly, the knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the most powerful medicine. And if you found my story helpful, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor your authentic self, whatever that looks like for you.